Welcome again to Wickerson Studios. I want to show the reason I keep coming back to the GH Python nodes and to the very basics of it. When you do end up getting a grasp of it and follow through a few tutorials, it's not hard to start to customize and make your own nodes. And I've been working on those for a little while. If I just jump in here, and I don't really have anything in the basic nodes to bring visually to what's going on here, but I do, however, have the basics to get going in Python and to do some basic geometry with points. And that's just a point system that's created here from some very simple scripts. And until you make a script customized yours, like if you write one in Python, and this one you can open up and see all I did was switch it over to write yourself a comment and then a multi-line write yourself a multi-line comment. And I just made that a very interesting basic tool over here that I can pull down whenever I want and make comments for myself. So I might end up using that, maybe not. But things get complex really quickly. So if you go into the next one, and this plugin here is what I like about making them my own nodes is with the bifocals tool, or actually without the bifocals node, I think with it, it will come up the titles that you want to give it. So writing a simple script in here dealing with all the operators of plus, minus, multiplication, modulus, and things like that, I can produce my own node that has its own parametric controls to get a list of all that data, which is kind of like a little calculator. So that one I popped up here into operators under basics as well. I think that's just a little squished here. You can see over here basic operators. And then you can just grab that whenever you want, and you can call out information if you need. They're still pretty foolish kind of nodes to get started, but here's one that I'm ending up finding a very basic writing of dealing in increments and decrement. And you don't need all this information at the top to begin scripting, but you're learning how to output and to print data, and you're understanding how data gets processed through here and how you can have these shortcuts. It's something worth looking at. So obviously, if I initialize x at 10 and y at 5, x plus equal y actually means x equals x plus y. So you've now set x to 15, and then it only prints the final version of x. So it skips these two comment lines of minus increment and multiplication increment, and you go right on to x, which is at 15 divided by y, which would be, once again, y would stay at 5 because that's what it is at, and you get an answer of 3, and you get a nice float number on that. So this one I probably brought in and put it under the maths, increment and decrement. And I don't know if I'll ever use that node that way, but it just keeps going. And you end up taking another one. You might want to customize it, take a look at the script. It doesn't say what it does. You have to kind of hover over here and you have to type in what you want. It's a comparison logical operator. It basically says, if x is less than y, if x is greater than y, or x is equal to it, you're going to end up typing in this. So as you move that slider, you can see you end up getting different text because you're writing within a string line. So it's extremely basic. The script is there for people that want to play with it and get into it. Most of these things I probably would never use, but it is good to get in here and practice. So if I grab this one, which is dealing with I call it Wickerson Studio GH loop. If you see the script, and be sure to lock down any other scripts, close them, otherwise you'll be working on them. But if you see the script within here, and we zoom in right there to what the script is saying, you are using RhinoScript syntax as RS, but actually I don't think I use it in here. I just use the range function, which is already included. And I said for I in range x, which range x is 2, it's going to print I. So it's going to start at 0 and do 1. And then I typed in a print nothing, which would print just a blank line. If you don't, you'll get a null. If you take out the space and run that, you're going to get a null, empty written in here. So I just like to leave it that it comes up as data in an empty way. Just space that out. And then it goes in and it says, okay, for I in range x, y. And so that says for I in range 2, as it goes from 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, stops at 6, then it's stuck because it doesn't go all the way up to 7. It hits 7, it doesn't process I. And then I leave another space and I say, okay, I in range x, y, z. And you start to think of this as start, stop, step. And then it starts to make sense. And you might want to have a little range function in here that you can name range and play with it. And once again, you would just right click on this. Don't know if I showed it in this video. Go up to your user objects, create user objects. It would be a GH while loop. Copy that, paste that in as a name, go to your user objects. It could be basics, but it is dealing in the range function. I think it's pretty basic stuff. You could categorize it into loops. But I'm liking this system, which actually deals with point cloud. So I'm going to leave it into basics under range. And then I'm going to pop in my own little icon here off of my desktop. And then I'm just going to select that color that I like and put that one in there. And I think we'll see jump up there in basics. We just got our little node loop, which you can bring in here. We can output our output to there. We can input our sliders to here. And we're not dependent on that Python node that doesn't give us as much information. Pack that one up here, put this one here, and there you go. You get the Wickerson Studio GH loop running. So you're customizing your own nodes, and you know what they do, and you build your own ribbon tools. Now, this continues, and I run through different types of ranges. This one being dealing with a list. Different scripts are in different ones here. They're coming from the textbook, but I am building upon them. I'm learning some very interesting things and changes between appending a list and extending a list and what that does to the data. So this is all things you have to sit down and you have to spend the time and learn. The more you understand it, the less you have to memorize. And if you think you just have to memorize, then you're going to end up just remembering where all this information is. And it's best to have it understood in your own mind. The next one here is a function tool, which is my first go at a function, which is pretty fun because it's just building a rectangular area, length times width, and I'm setting in my x, y to be the length times width because I can use a function definition to do that. So start getting into your functions, writing more complex things. And then I think there's a function down here that writes similar function 5 and 6 being put in. That's x and y in a loop, and it's running a range of the loop. So you can see that it's actually multiplying the number times the increment I as I slowly gets bigger. So you can have this really fast growth number system that just generates these huge numbers. So, you know, you're writing functions, you're actually running functions, you're writing definitions, you're running those functions. Could be a very interesting tool. Once you get through that, you're going to go into geometries very quickly. And this is where it gets a little interesting. If I hover over this one, it's dealing with a number slider points, generating points from a number slider, which isn't too hard. If I took a look at the script, it's starting to use the Rhino script syntax, but you can begin to start seeing how that translates and when it's in use as opposed to when Rhino geometries are being used. And this is where you really have to start thinking of programming. C# programming helped me out a lot. Looking in the Rhino Common and looking in the namespaces really becomes important as you process through these. So I'm not going to break them all down. You can see the data being generated in each one. This is an array of points that's generated. This one is a conditional example. This one is and optically, I guess I could show, but it's pretty boring stuff. The numbers are so low. If I just show it's not too much to look at there, so I'll just leave it out. You can see that last helix over top of that last form. You see how complex these things get very quickly with a little bit of color and a little bit of skill. And this is the one that I actually pulled out a color field study and then just used a post node to deal with color. And then I dealt with points here and put it into a curve, very simple helix form. And things get, you know, and that's one where you actually, I believe, started importing the math libraries. So if I went into here, you'll see that I've had the import Rhino script syntax, math at M, and I just did an F range, which is interesting because Rhino script syntax can handle decimals, whereas the range function in Rhino geometry, the range function in Python is not as stable or can do as much as it can in the C# code and scripting. So you'll have to play around with that. There's lots of examples. The book is worth going to. And I wanted to end with why this is so essential to learn things like this. And I've had a friend who just recently sent me, I'm just going to go to a new document. He just sent me finally a morph tool from ARA Jewelers, which is amazing. I'm going to bring it in here and open it up just very quickly. And I'm going to show how Wickerson Studios gets together with another company. So I'm going to import it in here. Not sure why it's not jumping in there. Let me just flatten this down. And that should open within this window. I think what I'll do is I'll go to open and find it on my desktop. I believe it's there. Cancel. At least it should be. Give it a second to load up. Very strange that it didn't. Have here is basically a cluster I made. Actually, I made a script within this cluster, and then Ralph at ARA Jewelers put that in, nested that into a bigger cluster, but it basically deals with an awful lot of different maths. And you can see the surface edit that's actually happening here is really trigged out, trigonometrically compiling. It's got quite a few curves, so it's a little crazy. But right now he's applied this pentagon or this star pentagon to his ARA system of creating some really wonderful things. He's got a ring morph tile 3D 4.0, which he's bringing on as the fourth version for ARA jewelry, and you're left with, as long as you have the patience to go in and get the latest version of Rhino 7.2 or higher, 7.3, you can bring in the paneling tools, but you have to be very careful when you do that. You have to go back into Rhino, and this is something nobody told me. It took me forever to find. You've got to go into your properties, which is on my other sheet, and go to your updates and statistics. So if I was to go back into there, you got to go into update and statistics on your property tab, and you've got to change this from service release to service relief candidate. And if that's done, you should have no problem opening it up again and getting panel tools running on your Grasshopper. It's a little harder than getting it running on your Rhino. So that's a nightmare to get through, but really you bring this kind of logic between ARA together with the mathematical logic that I'm playing with at Wickerson Studios. You can see as we jazz this up, let's see how long it takes to run. It's thinking. It's a little mad at me. At least I think I hit it to true. Let's give it a second. It's trying to process this trigonometric surface as a point grid, and you can see it's really thinking about that and trying to form that and run that all over the ring surface here. And with any luck, it should be able to do it in a couple of minutes. I might hit pause and see where we're at. Zoom that in. Yeah, you can see how that has a really nice effect on there. Let me go over to rendered. There we go. Take it off of Grasshopper. And there we go. Very nice. It takes what is running in my mind, which is this point system, this point grid, turned into these curves, which is lofted into this surface and turned into that rep. That's really what's happening within the Wickerson Studio node, even though I know he did some different things here to make it a little more jazzy. Nested in there is probably my original node. You can see it right down there on the left, the high left of that. So that's a collaboration between Ralph Schroeder and Michael Wickerson. So very cool. You start with this form, and that is completely, it'll take a little while to run, so you probably want to stop it, but it's different than, importing in geometries like this. You can actually go in and make a pretty complex one and use some really nice, I think it's actually just sine and cosine, compiling it. And then you do have to run through all of the ARA wonders and this beautiful cluster that Ralph has put together. As long as you have panel tools within Rhino and Grasshopper 7.2 or higher, you can turn these into these great nodes and end up with some pretty fantastic things. And I like that there's a ring that possibly can come into being, or could be a massive sculpture. I actually think I might take that to print on a larger scale and cast that as a actual sculptural piece in bronze. So very excited about where this is going and the collaboration I'm doing with Ralph. And we'll keep doing it. And I know I've got to clean up one of my panel tools now, because he said get that off of there, take that one off and put the other one on as I load it up. So yeah, it's like a box morph that on steroids because of Ralph, and Wickerson Studios takes the math and makes it awesome. So thanks very much for watching, and we'll continue. GH Python.